I stood in the hallway of Riverside Care Facility, holding a paper cup of terrible coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, that awful flickering sound that makes you feel like you're trapped inside someone else's nightmare. Room 304. I'd been staring at that number for 20 minutes, unable to make myself walk through the door. Inside that room, Margaret Reynolds was dying. My mother-in-law, the woman who'd spent 30 years making sure I knew I wasn't good enough for her son. The coffee cup shook in my hand. I set it down on the narrow windowsill and pressed my palms against my jeans, trying to steady myself. Through the small window in the door, I could see the edge of her hospital bed, the machines that beeped and hummed, keeping her tethered to a life she was ready to leave. "Mrs. Cooper?" A nurse appeared beside me, her voice soft. She was young, maybe 25, with kind eyes that had probably seen too much death already. "She's been asking for you. She's very insistent." "I know," I whispered. "I just need another minute." The nurse touched my shoulder gently. "I don't think she has many minutes left." I closed my eyes and thought about the first time I'd met Margaret Reynolds. I was 22 years old, holding David's hand in the foyer of their enormous house in Westchester. Margaret had looked me up and down with those cold blue eyes, taking in my thrift store dress and my nervous smile, and the first words she ever said to me were, "David, darling, where did you find this one?" That was 30 years ago. 30 years of holidays where she'd introduce me to her friends as David's wife without using my name. 30 years of backhanded compliments about my cooking, my clothes, my career, my parenting. 30 years of her reminding everyone in the family that David could have married Penelope Ashford, the senator's daughter, the girl with the right background and the right connections. And now she was dying, and she wanted to see me. Not David, not her grandchildren. Me. I pushed open the door. The room smelled like antiseptic and something else, something I couldn't name but recognized anyway. The smell of a body giving up. Margaret lay propped against white pillows, so small she barely made a shape under the thin blanket. The cancer had eaten away at her until she looked like a paper doll, all sharp angles and translucent skin. But her eyes were still the same. Sharp, calculating, missing nothing. "Sarah," she said, and her voice was a rasp, barely there. "You came." "You asked for me," I said, staying near the door. Even dying, I wasn't sure I could trust her not to hurt me somehow. "Close the door." I hesitated, then did as she asked. The click of the latch felt too loud in the quiet room. "Come closer. I can't shout anymore." A ghost of a smile crossed her thin lips. Though God knows I used to enjoy it. I moved to the chair beside her bed and sat down, my hands folded in my lap like a child called to the principal's office. Margaret turned her head slowly to look at me, and something in her expression made my breath catch. I'd never seen her look at me like that before, almost like she was seeing me for the first time. 30 years, she whispered. 30 years I've been cruel to you. Margaret, you don't need to. Yes, I do. Her hand shot out with surprising strength and grabbed mine. Her fingers felt like bird bones, fragile and cold. I need to tell you before I run out of time. I need you to understand. Understand what? She closed her eyes, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. I'd never seen Margaret Reynolds cry, not once in 3 decades. "I was protecting you," she said. The words didn't make sense. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, the final cruelty she'd saved for her deathbed. But when she opened her eyes again, what I saw there wasn't malice. It was something that looked almost like love. "From what?" I asked, my voice barely working. "From my son." The machines beeped. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed. The world kept turning. But in that moment, everything inside me stopped. "I don't understand." Margaret's grip tightened on my hand. "David isn't who you think he is, Sarah. He never was." She paused, struggling for breath. "And I've spent 30 years making you strong enough to survive finding out." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Margaret, what are you talking about?" She reached under her pillow with her free hand and pulled out a small silver key. It was old-fashioned, the kind that might open a jewelry box or a diary. She pressed it into my palm. "Safety deposit box," she whispered. "First National Bank downtown, box 447. Everything you need is in there. Documents, proof, money." Money? $8 million. She said it like she was telling me the time. "I've been hiding it from David for 32 years. Since before you even met him." I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. "This doesn't make any sense." "Listen to me." Margaret pulled me closer with strength I didn't know she still had. "David's father, Robert, died when David was 19. Car accident. That's what everyone thinks. That's what you told me." "I lied." Her voice cracked. "Robert didn't die in an accident. David killed him." The key fell from my hand and hit the floor with a tiny metallic sound that seemed impossibly loud. "No," I said. "No, that's not—" "I covered it up," Margaret continued, her words coming faster now, like she was racing against the clock. "I had money, connections. I made it look like an accident. But I knew. God help me. I knew what my son was capable of. I tried to stand up, but my legs wouldn't work. Why are you telling me this?" "Why now?" "Because you're in danger." Tears were streaming down her face now. "David has been planning to leave you. I've known for months, but he's not going to just divorce you, Sarah. He's going to make you disappear." The words hit me like a physical blow. I shook my head, trying to clear it, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. "That's insane. David wouldn't—" "He's done it before." The room went silent except for the beeping machines. "What?" Margaret's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "You weren't his first wife, Sarah." I felt like I was falling, even though I was sitting down. "Yes, I was. He told me." "He lied." Margaret reached for a folder tucked beside her pillow. Her hands shook as she opened it and pulled out a photograph. "Her name was Rachel Bennett. They were married for 18 months. She disappeared 29 years ago. David reported her missing. The police investigated but never found anything." I stared at the photograph. A young woman with dark hair and a bright smile standing in front of a house I didn't recognize. She looked happy. She looked alive. "He killed her," Margaret said flatly. "I didn't know until after, but then I found things. Evidence he'd been too careless to destroy completely, and I realized my son was a monster." "Why didn't you go to the police?" "Because he's my son." Her voice broke on the words. "Because I'm a coward. Because I thought if I watched him closely enough, if I made sure he never got desperate enough, I could prevent it from happening again." "By being cruel to me?" I heard the anger rising in my voice. "By making my life miserable?" "By making you strong," Margaret corrected. "Every time I criticized you, every time I pushed you, I was testing you, building you up, making sure you wouldn't be like Rachel, sweet and trusting and easy to erase." She grabbed my hand again. "And I was watching David, every single day, watching for signs that he was planning something." "And you saw them." 2 months ago, he opened a new bank account. In the Cayman Islands. He's been moving money." She pulled out more papers from her folder. "He bought life insurance on you, $2 million, and last week he hired someone. I don't know who or for what, but I know my son, Sarah. I know what he's planning." I felt numb, disconnected from my body. "I don't believe you. This is some kind of sick game." "The safety deposit box," Margaret said urgently. "Everything is there. Rachel's case file, photos, David's financial records, a letter I wrote explaining everything." She paused, gasping for air. "And the $8 million. Money I've been skimming from David's inheritance for 30 years. Money he doesn't know exists. Why would you give it to me?" "Because you're going to need it." Her eyes locked onto mine with terrible intensity. "When you leave him, when you expose him, when you make sure he never hurts anyone else. I can't just—" "You have to." She was fading now, her voice getting weaker. "I'm dying, Sarah, and when I'm gone, there's no one left to protect you but yourself. Promise me. Promise me you'll go to that bank. Promise me you'll get out before he—" She started coughing, harsh and wet. I reached for the call button, but she grabbed my wrist. "Promise me," she gasped. "I promise," I whispered. She smiled then, and for the first time in 30 years, it looked genuine. "I'm sorry I was cruel, but I needed you to be strong enough for this moment. I needed you to be able to survive him." "Margaret!" "The key," she said, her eyes starting to close. "Don't lose the key." I bent down and picked it up from the floor, closing my fist around it. When I looked back at Margaret, her eyes were shut, her breathing shallow. "Margaret, one more thing," she whispered without opening her eyes. "I loved you like a daughter, even though I could never show it. Especially because I could never show it." She took one more breath, then another, then stopped. The machine's steady beep turned into a long, unbroken whine. Nurses rushed in. I stepped back. The key clutched so tight in my hand it left an imprint in my palm. They worked on her for 7 minutes before calling it. Time of death, 3:47 p.m. I walked out of that room in a daze. Down the hallway, through the lobby, out into the parking lot where the afternoon sun felt obscenely bright and normal. People were going about their lives, buying groceries, walking dogs, completely unaware that my entire world had just shattered and reformed into something I didn't recognize. I sat in my car for an hour before I could make my hands work well enough to put the key in the ignition. Then I drove. Not home. I couldn't go home. Not to David. Not yet. I drove to a coffee shop 3 towns over and sat in a back corner booth with my phone and my terrible thoughts. I needed to think. I needed to decide if what Margaret told me was real or the delusion of a dying woman who'd hated me so long she couldn't die without one final act of cruelty. But the key was real, solid and cold in my pocket, and Margaret's words kept echoing in my head. "You weren't his first wife." I pulled out my phone and typed "Rachel Bennett missing 1994" into the search bar. The results loaded slowly. Then I saw it. A newspaper article from the Hartford Courant dated October 15, 1994. "Local woman missing. Police search for Rachel Bennett, 24. There was a photo, the same young woman from Margaret's picture smiling at the camera. The article said she'd disappeared after telling friends she was going on a weekend trip with her husband. Her car was found abandoned at a rest stop off I-95. Her husband, David Reynolds, reported her missing 2 days later. The investigation went cold after 6 months. No body was ever found. My hands started shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. I searched for more, found 3 more articles. A follow-up piece, a 1-year anniversary story, a final article from 1997 saying the case remained unsolved and the family had held a memorial service. David had never mentioned any of this. Not once in 30 years. I thought about our wedding, how Margaret had looked at me with those cold eyes and said, "Are you sure you know what you're getting into?" I'd thought she was being snobby, cruel. Now I wondered if she was trying to warn me. I sat in that coffee shop until it got dark outside, until the barista started giving me concerned looks. Finally, I got up, threw away my cold cup, and drove to First National Bank. It was closed, but that was fine. I needed time to prepare myself anyway, to decide if I was really going to do this. That night, I went home. David was in his study, working late as usual. He looked up when I came in, and I saw my husband like I was seeing him for the first time. His smile was warm, familiar. It was the same smile he'd given me on our wedding day, on the day our daughter was born, on 1,000 ordinary mornings over 3 decades. "How's Margaret?" he asked. "She died," I said, watching his face carefully. Something flickered in his eyes. Relief? Satisfaction? It was gone so fast I couldn't be sure. "I'm sorry, honey," he said, standing up to hug me. "I know she was difficult, but she was still family." I let him hold me and wondered if he could feel my heart pounding. Wondered if he knew I was carrying his mother's secret in my pocket. "Are you okay?" he asked, pulling back to look at me. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired. I think I'll go to bed early." "I'll be up soon," he said, kissing my forehead. I went upstairs, locked myself in the bathroom, and vomited until there was nothing left. The next morning, I told David I needed to handle some of Margaret's affairs. He barely looked up from his newspaper. "Take your time," he said. "I know this must be hard for you." I drove to First National Bank and waited in my car until they opened. My hands were sweating so badly I could barely hold the key. Inside, I told the clerk I needed to access a safety deposit box. She led me to a small private room, verified my identity against the box registration, and left me alone. Box 447 was larger than I expected, heavy. I set it on the small table and stared at it for a long moment before using Margaret's key. Inside were file folders, manila envelopes, and a small leather journal. I opened the first folder. Financial records, showing David moving money systematically over the past 3 months. Offshore accounts, shell companies. My hands shook as I flipped through page after page of evidence that my husband was hiding assets. The second folder made my blood run cold. Life insurance policies. Not just one, 3. All taken out on me in the past year. Total value, $5 million. The third folder contained photos, recent photos, of me, at the grocery store, at yoga class, getting coffee. Someone had been following me. The fourth folder was labeled Rachel Bennett. I almost didn't open it. Part of me wanted to put everything back, lock the box, and pretend I'd never come here. But I couldn't, not now. Inside were police reports, newspaper clippings, and photos. Rachel's missing person file, and tucked in the back, a single page in Margaret's handwriting. I found this in David's desk 3 months after Rachel disappeared. He doesn't know I have it. Paper-clipped to the note was a receipt for a boat rental, dated the day Rachel disappeared. David had told police he was home that weekend, but the receipt showed he'd rented a boat from a marina in Mystic, Connecticut, for 1 day. A boat that could take you far out into Long Island Sound, where the water is deep and dark. I felt sick again. The final item in the box was a leather journal, Margaret's diary. I opened it to a random page. June 3rd, 1995. I saw how David looked at that girl today, the new receptionist at his office, the same way he looked at Rachel before she disappeared. I need to do something. But what? If I go to the police now, they'll ask why I waited, why I helped cover it up. I'd go to prison too. My grandchildren would know what their father is, what their grandmother did. So, I'll watch, and I'll wait, and I'll pray he never gets that look in his eyes again. I flipped forward in the journal, reading Margaret's careful documentation of her son's life, her growing horror as she watched him court me, marry me, build a life with me while she wondered every day if I would be next. And then I found the entry that made everything clear. March 12th, 1996. David brought home a girl today, Sarah. She's young, maybe 22, pretty, kind, too kind. She'll never survive him, unless I make her stronger, unless I teach her to fight back. I know what I have to do. I have to make her hate me. I have to make her tough enough that when the time comes, she'll be able to save herself. Tears blurred my vision. 30 years of calculated cruelty. 30 years of Margaret pushing me away while secretly protecting me, building armor around me one insult at a time. At the bottom of the box was a sealed envelope with my name on it. Inside was a cashier's check for $8 million and a letter in Margaret's shaky handwriting. Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, I'm dead and you know the truth. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive. I'm sorry I was cruel, but I needed you to be strong, and kindness wouldn't have made you strong. The money is yours. I've been stealing it from David for 30 years, skimming from his inheritance, his business accounts, anywhere I could without him noticing. It's not enough to make up for what I've done to you, but it's enough to disappear if you need to. Get a lawyer, a good one, someone who specializes in cases like this. Show them everything in this box. And Sarah, please get away from my son before he does to you what he did to Rachel. You were the daughter I should have had. I hope someday you can forgive me. Margaret. I sat in that small room for over an hour, reading through every document, every photo, every page of Margaret's diary, building a picture of the man I'd been married to for 30 years, a man I'd never really known. When I finally left the bank, the box's contents were in my bag, and my life had changed forever. I sat in my car and called a lawyer. Not our family lawyer, a criminal defense attorney whose name I'd found in one of Margaret's notes. "I need help," I told her when she answered. "My husband might be planning to kill me." 2 days later, I met with Sarah Morrison, the attorney, in her downtown office. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. She listened to everything without interrupting, examining each document I'd brought. "This is substantial," she said finally. "But it's not enough to convict him of Rachel's murder. That case is 29 years old. No body, no physical evidence." "What about the boat rental?" "Circumstantial. He could say he went fishing. Changed his mind about telling the police because he didn't want to seem suspicious." She looked at me seriously. "But the life insurance policies, the offshore accounts, the surveillance photos, this is enough to get law enforcement interested, especially combined with Rachel's case." "What do I do?" "First, you don't go home. Not until we have security measures in place." She picked up her phone. "I'm calling a private investigator I work with, someone who can watch your house, document David's movements, and I'm going to reach out to a detective I know who specializes in cold cases. And then we build a case strong enough that David Reynolds spends the rest of his life in prison." But things moved faster than either of us expected. That night, while I was staying at a hotel under a fake name, I got a call from our daughter Emily. Her voice was panicked. "Mom, where are you? Dad says you never came home last night." "He's worried." I closed my eyes. "I'm fine, sweetie. I just needed some space after your grandmother died." "Mom, that's not like you. What's going on?" I wanted to tell her everything, to warn her about her father. But how do you tell your child that their father is a murderer? "I'll explain soon," I said. "But Emily, I need you to trust me. Don't tell your father where I am. You're scaring me." "I know, I'm sorry. Just please trust me for a few more days." I hung up before she could ask more questions. The next morning, Sarah Morrison called. "We have a problem." My stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "David reported you missing. Filed a police report this morning saying you disappeared after visiting your mother-in-law at the nursing home. Said you've been distraught and he's worried you might hurt yourself." The phone slipped in my hand. "He's setting it up, just like Rachel." "That's what I think too, which means we need to move now. I've contacted Detective Linda Hayes with the state police. She's reopening Rachel's case based on the evidence you provided, and I'm arranging for you to make a statement. Will that be enough to arrest him?" "Not yet, but it'll be enough to stop him from doing anything to you. Once the police start asking questions about Rachel, he'll know we're on to him." That afternoon, I sat in a small interview room at the state police barracks and told Detective Hayes everything. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with tired eyes that had seen too much. She recorded my statement, examined Margaret's documents, and made phone call after phone call. Finally, she looked at me across the scarred table. "Mrs. Cooper, I'm going to be honest with you. This case is going to be hard to prove, but I believe you, and I believe Margaret. I remember the Rachel Bennett case. I was a rookie then, but I remember. The lead detective always thought something was off about David's story. Can you protect me? I can make sure your husband knows we're investigating. That usually stops people from doing anything stupid. But Mrs. Cooper, you need to file for divorce. Immediately. And you need to do it publicly, with the media watching if possible." "Why?" "Because if something happens to you now, with an active police investigation and divorce proceedings, your husband becomes the obvious suspect. Right now, he thinks he can make you disappear quietly. We need to make it loud." Sarah Morrison filed divorce papers the next day, and she didn't just file them. She called a press conference. I stood next to her in front of a dozen cameras and reporters, my hands shaking, and read from a prepared statement. "My name is Sarah Cooper. I'm filing for divorce from my husband, David Reynolds, and I'm doing so publicly because I fear for my safety. I've provided evidence to state police that my husband may have been involved in the disappearance of his first wife, Rachel Bennett, in 1994. I'm also concerned that he's been planning a similar fate for me." The cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and somewhere across town I knew David was watching and realizing his mother had betrayed him from beyond the grave. That night, the story was everywhere. Local news, national news, social media. David Reynolds, successful businessman and pillar of the community, accused by his own wife of murder. The next morning, police executed a search warrant on our house. They found more than any of us expected. Hidden in David's study, behind a false panel in his bookshelf, was a box. Inside were Rachel's wedding ring, her driver's license, and dozens of photos of her. And underneath those, recent photos of me. Hundreds of them. Some had red X marks drawn across my face. They arrested David that afternoon. I watched the news coverage from my hotel room, seeing my husband led out of our house in handcuffs. He looked calm, almost amused. Like this was all just a minor inconvenience. But 2 days later, something changed. David's lawyer called Sarah Morrison. David wanted to talk. He wanted to make a deal. We met in a conference room at the prosecutor's office. David sat across from me, looking smaller somehow. Older. He stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. "You really didn't know," he said finally. "All these years, you had no idea." "About Rachel?" "No." "About any of it." He almost smiled. "My mother did her job well. She made you exactly what you needed to be." "Someone who'd survive you?" "Someone who'd beat me." He leaned back in his chair. "I wondered sometimes if she knew, if that's why she was so cruel to you, making you strong, making you suspicious. She was always watching me, you know, every day of my life, waiting for me to slip up. Why did you kill Rachel? She was going to leave me, take half of everything in the divorce. I couldn't allow that." He said it so casually, like he was discussing the weather. "But you, Sarah, you were different. I actually loved you. For a while. What changed? You got boring, predictable, and the life insurance policies were just too tempting." He looked at me with those cold eyes. "I would have made it quick. Unlike Rachel. She fought, screamed, made it messy." Detective Hayes stopped the recording. "That's enough. David Reynolds, you're under arrest for the murder of Rachel Bennett." As they led him away, David looked back at me one last time. "My mother won," he said. "After all these years, she finally won." The trial took 8 months. David pleaded guilty to Rachel's murder and attempted murder charges related to his plans for me. He was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. I testified at his sentencing hearing, told the judge about Margaret, about her 30-year plan to protect me, about the $8 million she'd hidden, and the strength she'd built in me one cruel word at a time. "Margaret Reynolds saved my life," I said. "And she did it by making me believe she hated me. She couldn't stop loving her son, but she could stop him from destroying another woman. So she built armor around me. And when the time came, when I needed to be strong enough to survive, I was, because of her." After the trial, I used Margaret's $8 million to start a foundation. We help women escape dangerous marriages, provide them with security, lawyers, safe houses, everything they need to disappear and start over. We call it Margaret's Gift. My daughter Emily struggled with everything at first, learning who her father really was, understanding why I'd kept secrets. But slowly, she came around, and one day she asked if she could help run the foundation. "Grandma Margaret would want this," she said. "She'd want something good to come from all of it." I visit Margaret's grave every month. I bring yellow roses and sit on the grass beside her headstone. "Thank you," I tell her every time. "Thank you for being cruel. Thank you for being brave. Thank you for loving me the only way you knew how." Sometimes when the wind blows just right, I swear I can hear her voice. "You're welcome, darling. You're finally strong enough."